Today we're going to be reviewing DNA in the Sands of Time by J. Justice. This entire book is channeled from the Akashic records. So just like this book says, this is for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. So now the question is, how can I prove all of this? Why do I believe this if I was born and raised Catholic? So first of all, I can't prove this. You can't really prove non-physical stuff unless you're like highly spiritually evolved, when you have your psychic vision and all that. And also the technology is not there yet for us to prove certain non-physical things. If you completely deny any of this information, that's fine. But you'll probably find out the information a harder way in another lifetime. So better learn it now and accept it now. So despite me being raised Catholic, I always wondered why so many things didn't make sense to me in the Bible and the church's teachings. For example, there are no conditions attached to something that is unconditional like God. I'm not saying all of the Bible or church's teachings are wrong to me, but some of the stuff never made sense to me. Some of the stuff. And upon reading this book, which is all channeled from the Akashic records, which is a etheric storehouse of all things that are created that cannot be rewritten or changed by anything, are all here in that realm. I have opened my mind to what I believe is the actual truth that we've been lied to about from those in power, the ones who work for the dark to make us believe we're powerless, when in reality we have the DNA of so many higher dimensional races, and if we unlocked these parts of our DNA, they would be so fucked. And also, I am not blindly agreeing to everything in this book. There's actually a lot of information in this book that I surprisingly do not agree with, and that's okay. So first off, let's talk about what consciousness is. This is how the book defines it. Consciousness is the knowledge of our spiritual existence, of knowing who you are, knowing where you came from, knowing how you came here, knowing what you are doing here, knowing how to leave here, knowing where you are going, and knowing how to get there. The level of your consciousness is directly affected by the knowledge that you have, the understanding of that knowledge, and the wisdom that you have gained from your understanding of that knowledge. So in the Bible, Jesus was asked by the Pharisees what the problem with man was. His reply was sin. So Jesus spoke in the Aramaic language, and his teachings were also in this language. The word sin in Aramaic simply means separation. That is exactly what happened in the fall. So in the time of Atlantis, we know from the Convoluted Universe Book 1 by Dolores Cannon that the higher ups were genetically experimenting with everything, mixing animals with animals and humans with humans. And animals with humans, in every combination you could think of. In this book, it says the souls watching this happen the souls that were watching this happen in the spiritual realm found it curious to enter into these hybrid bodies. So what they did was they lowered their high vibration to a low vibration a little bit too quickly, with no previous incarnations in a human or animal body, and they lost their connection to Creator and forgot about their abilities and became trapped in these bodies. This moment was the fall and the beginning of original sin, which means original separation. They simply made a mistake based on ignorance that was due to lack of experience. This is where the mistranslation of the word sin in the Bible caused many errors in truth, directly affecting people's physical and spiritual lives. So then a second group of souls lowered their vibration very slowly into humanoid bodies to help take care of the trapped souls from the first group. As the second group became more involved with low vibrational emotions, they created karma that required them to return to this experience over and over in many lifetimes. The karma they created trapped the second group in the fourth dimensional experience, just like the first group. Also Atlantis was in the fourth dimension. Now everyone was trapped on the wheel of incarnation, which is basically how we are here today on Earth, due to this never-ending wheel of karma, which began mainly from Atlantis falling. The destruction of Atlantis came about from the Atlanteans experimenting with heat energy. They began using the power of their crystals to drill down through the Earth's crust in order to tap into this heat source that was deep inside the Earth. This created seismic activity that weakened the crust of the earth, and then a magnetic pole shift occurred, which created disaster everywhere with volcanoes and earthquakes and the sinking of Atlantis. Physical life went from fourth dimension to third, which is why archaeologists can't find remains of Atlantis now, because the remains reside in the fourth dimension. So the planet Nibiru was home to the Nephilim, also known as the Anunnaki. And I'm going to switch the terms back and forth because they're the same thing. The Anunnaki came from a distant galaxy that is located near the edge of our universe from the direction of Canis Major and Canis Minor, which is the gateway to the lower heavens. They discovered this fifth dimensional race called the Iboka when they landed on Earth. So it's pronounced Iba, even though it's spelled Ibocca because of the fast vibration that it should be pronounced in. The Iba were a master geneticists from another universe that were on Earth for the purpose of creating a humanoid race. They created Homo erectus. As the Nephilim's planet Nibiru was slowly dying due to lack of oxygen, they found that gold on Earth was able to slow down the loss of oxygen on their planet by refining the gold and suspending it into their atmosphere. And eventually they got tired of mining the gold themselves for so long that they got the idea to create a slave race of workers to do the work for them, using the knowledge they learned from the Iba race, thus creating Homo sapiens, which Adam and Eve were the first people perfected by the Nephilim. It took thousands of trials and errors before the Nephilim created this perfect specimen, which ended up being Adam and Eve. And from The Keepers of the Garden by Dolores Cannon, and from this book, we know that there is no missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. There's no connection at all, because Homo sapiens are a genetic manipulation, genetically engineered by the Nephilim and the Syrians to fill the need of mining gold for the Nephilim. The Nephilim mixed their genes with Homo erectus, which created Homo sapiens. Side note, oh no, I already said that, sorry. The Iba also lived 3 universes away, and they travel in and out of this universe. So anyways, the combination of Homo erectus and Nephilim is what gives us our basic human form. There were many humanoid survivors that fell from 4th dimension Atlantis, which contributed to our modern day genetic pool. The original human race all had one skin color, which is neutral white, and very light brown hair with a reddish tint. The different skin colors and skin tones and different nationalities in the human race today are a direct result of the many different genes of those that fell from 4th dimension Atlantis. In time, they all became absorbed by the 2-stranded DNA of the humans, creating our modern day human race. Also, extra side note, the Homo erectus race has evolved from 12-stranded to 36 to 48-stranded DNA. Occasionally, they come to visit the 3rd dimension, usually staying only a very short time. This is when they accidentally have encounters with the humans. Homo erectus are Bigfoot beings. So another side note, the Syrians who helped co-create humans with the Anunnaki implanted us with something known as silica. This substance is the reason why humans are allowed to evolve and retain knowledge, because if it wasn't for this super important substance, supposedly we would have never evolved to how we are today. And this goes against everything that the Anunnaki wanted, because they wanted us to just be slaves and die when it was time for us to die. So the Nephilim are not an old race. They were created around 250 million years ago in a distant universe by a very highly evolved race. And the book never mentions what race, but the Nephilim have an unlimited lifetime due to their 36-stranded DNA code. A small number of Nephilim are as old as the race itself. They have lived in the same physical body for around 250 million years. During the genetic engineering of humans, the Nephilim purposely left out the long lifespan genetic trait. Humans were genetically engineered to live an average of 750 years. The Nephilim are 4th dimensional beings that are highly evolved, which gives them capabilities that are beyond your imagination. They have the knowledge and capability to work at the molecular level, genetic and atomic level. Splitting the atom is a very ancient technology to them. They are space travelers and possess an intimate knowledge of the workings of stars and planets. They try to teach humans the knowledge of the solar system and show us how Its subtle energies and planetary alignments affect us physically, emotionally, and ultimately spiritually. This is where the science of astrology came from. Their mental capacity and ability is so evolved that they can listen to a new language and learn it while the other person is speaking it. Their psychic abilities are so advanced that they can listen in on our thought patterns anytime they choose. They also have the ability to directly influence our thoughts by putting their thoughts in our minds by telepathy. So the Homo erectus diet was very natural and what we today would call a vegetarian diet. The digestive system of the human race is the same as the Homo erectus. Humans were not wise enough to understand this about themselves. They learned everything from the Nephilim gods. They saw that the Nephilim ate meat, so the humans copied them. The humans didn't know that because the Nephilim were 36-stranded DNA, the Nephilim's DNA had the ability to protect their bodies from the harsh consequences of eating meat. Humans, on the other hand, were 2-stranded DNA with no protection from the consequences of eating meat. The eating of animal meat causes a slow progressive deterioration of the physical body. It changes the balance of the body's acids, causing cellular damage over time. It also introduces foreign viruses and bacteria into the human body, which would be passed on to their children through birth and into following generations. It was the beginning of what we now call disease. The habit of eating meat also sped up the shortening of the human lifespan. Originally, the human race had one blood type altogether, a mixture of Nephilim blood and Homo erectus blood. The reason we have as many types as we do today is due to the after events of the Great Flood. The fourth-dimensional Atlanteans came down to third dimension and ended up mating with humans, which started the different blood types since the Atlanteans had different blood types to begin with. No longer does the original form of the human blood type exist. There's no individual race left today that is a pure strain from the original single bloodline of humans, which originated from the creation of Homo sapiens by the genetic engineering of the Nephilim and Homo erectus genes. All humans are now crossbred with the survivors from Atlantis, and the single original human bloodline is non-existent. Realize also that there are no pure bloodlines existing from those that fell from the fourth dimension. I also have to randomly add that the Nephilim accumulated great karma for what they did to the human race this entire time. They are paying that karma off now and will continue to do so for a very long time. The book goes into greater detail, but I'm going to mention just a snippet of this. The book of Revelation is sealed in the Akashic records, which means that it's already completed. What this means is everything in the book that was truth has been completed over 1800 years ago, and it is finished. It's not happening again. The entire book of Revelation was for the Babylon and like the Tower of Babel, not for Earth now. Anything and everything that has teachings and predictions for the end of the world, including the return of Jesus to rapture his followers, that are based on the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel, or any other texts that are part of the information of the day of the Lord, are all false teachings. They were started by the sons of darkness to keep you in fear. If you believe in these end time prophecies, you have been tricked, and now you are a prisoner of your own beliefs and your own fears. So the book goes into greater detail, but I'm going to mention just a snippet of this. The book of Revelation is sealed in the Akashic records, which means that it is already completed. What this means is everything in the book that was truth has been completed over 1800 years ago, and it is finished. It's not happening again. Anything and everything that has teachings and predictions for the end of the world, including the return of Jesus to rapture his followers, that are based on the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, are based on any texts that are part of the information of the day of the Lord, are all false teachings. They were started by the sons of darkness to keep you in fear. If you believe in these end time prophecies, you have been tricked, and now you are a prisoner of your own beliefs and your own fears. So it says right here, another reason the universal laws are not being taught is that it is not in the best interest of the sons of darkness. They are the ones who are working behind the scenes to take your choice and power away so they can control your life. So now we're going to talk about the universal laws. Two of the most important universal laws are, as you believe, so shall it be. This law works constantly in our lives. Minute by minute, day by day, whatever we believe will eventually happen, good or bad. Look at your thoughts very carefully to see what is constantly on your mind. This is how we create our future. The other universal law is, whatever you create, you will experience. We create by our thoughts, by our beliefs, and by our actions. Think what happens when your thoughts, beliefs, or actions run wild. They will eventually become your future. Not a very pretty picture, is it? There are other universal laws, and we will briefly name them and give a brief description of what they pertain to. How many are you familiar with? So there's the law of action. We create our life or manifest something by thinking it, acting it, believing it, and speaking it. These four actions must be balanced together as one. There's the law of attraction. Like vibrations attract like vibrations. High vibrations attract high vibrations, and low vibrations attract low vibrations. Love attracts love, and fear attracts fear. There is the law of changing of energy. Thoughts are energy. We change energy by changing our thoughts, and by controlling our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs, and our words. There's the law of consequences. All actions are choices. Every single action we do has a consequence, for good or bad, that results from a previous action. We create life's daily events by every single action we do. There are no accidents in our life or in the universe. Our life is the result of our continuous, minute by minute, hour by hour, and day by day actions. The law of compensation. As we give to others, so will it be given to us. The expression, what goes around comes around, applies to the law of compensation and the law of consequences. Law of gender. Balance of yin and yang, balance of masculine and feminine energies, balance of positive and negative. The creative force of the universe is the balance of these opposites. So also there's the law of harmony. All laws in the universes affect each other, and all laws are in harmony with each other. There's the law of love. To allow all life forms and all things to exist in harmony in all of creation. The law of love is the fabric of the cosmos and the glue that holds everything together. There is the law of one. We are one. We are all part of one energy. We are all of one mind. We are all from one source. The infinite mind, the prime creator, the source of all that is. There's also the law of polarity. Everything has an opposite with varying degrees between these opposites. Law of balance. A state of balance where everything is dependent on everything else. Nothing is absolute. Law of rhythm. Universe operates in cycles or a rhythm, like the continuous rising and falling of the ocean tides, like the rising and setting of the sun. It affects everything in the universe. Law of vibration. Higher vibrations consume lower vibrations. Love and compassion, which are high vibrations, consume fear, anger, hate, revenge, judgment, etc., which are low vibrations. So we have talked about Atlantis and the problems they had with genetic experimentation. When Atlantis was formed, it was composed of many races, including many small groups of different races. The largest races that are important are the ones that we're going to talk about now, since they were the greatest part of Atlantis. And now remember, we're talking about life in the fourth dimension, not where we're at now, which is third dimension. Life was abundant in the fourth dimension. And these humanoid races looked very much like human beings, although they were not from the human race. They had some genetic differences. All of these races in the fourth dimension were 12-stranded DNA or higher. These races were the Lemurians, Specnuta, I think that's how you say it, Specnuta, Reptilians, Nomads, Greys, and the Lizards. So let's break it down, what they are. Okay. So the Lemurians looked like humans and came from the continent of Mu, often referred to as the motherland, which was located in what is now the Pacific Ocean. They were different in that they originally possessed a full set of male and female organs in the same body. They had the ability to procreate by inseminating themselves, becoming pregnant, and carrying the child full term until birth, then nurturing it, all without the help of another individual. Today we call a person who has both sets of sex organs a morphodite, but I think it's hermaphrodite now because this book was published in 2006, so I'm pretty sure it's hermaphrodite or both. Yeah, so describing them as a freak of nature or a genetic accident, that's what it says here. Before the time of Atlantis, this gene and genetic makeup was normal. It was a genetic trait that defined the Lemurian race. Most of this race was destroyed in the destruction of Atlantis, although not all of them. There were many survivors that dropped into the third dimensional level, bringing their genetic makeup into this reality. They crossbred with humans and other survivors of Atlantis, diluting their genetic makeup to the point that the morphodite gene became a recessive gene. This gene also appears when a spirit that was from the Lemurians race is born into a human body. This gene is carried in the morphogenic field around the master cell in the pineal gland and combines with human DNA, showing up as a recessive gene. There are many of these spirits from this race returning to Earth now and being born into human bodies at this time. They are normally very peaceful spirits, often referred to as peacemakers. So the Specnuta race, they're distinguished by what we would call a flat look. Their body features would resemble the features of this cartoon character that we call Gumby. This race of people comes from a planet that is 3 universes away from us. They're very emotional and have a hairless body with an average height between 4 and 5 feet tall. There were no survivors of this race from Atlantis. The Reptilians have a home planet in a neighboring universe. There were survivors from the fall of Atlantis into this reality, bringing their DNA with them. So they crossbred, diluting their genetic makeup with their genetic traits becoming recessive genes. When mixed with human DNA, these recessive genes produce distinguishing characteristics that could show up as an extra vertebrae in the spinal column, double joints, or extremely flexible joints and bodies. These are the people who can bend their fingers backwards, turn their legs backwards, twist their bodies, arms, legs, torso, and head in directions and positions that are totally impossible for normal 2-stranded DNA humans. These characteristics can show up all together, single or not at all. The normal reptilian DNA is totally different from human DNA. They seem to be equally divided between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. There is a segment of this race that is genetically modified, and they work with the dark forces. The original body forms these spirits lived in on their home world were dragon-type bodies. Today, many people associate them with crocodiles and alligators. Okay, so the Nomads are a race that live several universes away. They have the same body structure as man, being much bigger than man, with DNA resembling man's to a high degree. The front of their bodies are free of body hair, while their backs are thick with hair. They're basically like man, except that they are an average height of 8 to 9 feet tall. They are a very gentle people. They were described as the gentle giants of the universe. There were survivors of this race from Atlantis. They have crossbred with the only distinguishing feature being their height and their gentle disposition. So now we have the Greys. The Greys that were in Atlantis are the same group that was associated with the United States government for the last 60 years. It was from them that we have learned a tremendous amount of knowledge, achieving many technical advances. Many Grey spirits have incarnated into human bodies, and many of them were part of the Philadelphia experiment. The failure of this experiment was a major defeat and setback for the Greys. They lost the power they had gained in the government at that time. They are no longer on this planet in their normal genetic form. There are still many Grey spirits from the Grey race who are in human bodies, and they are trapped at this time in the human game of learning to control emotions and becoming a master of their emotions. They are a race that lacks many human emotions, especially love and compassion, and with excess emotions of apathy, fear, despair, and loss of hope. We will see them acting out this combination of emotions in acts that are hideous, sickening, and violent. As a race, they have failed to evolve. They are now a dying race. They are losing their soul. They destroyed their home planet in a war a long time ago. The Greys also have no respect for human life and were responsible for killing humans and animal mutilations in order to get access to genetic material to save their race from dying. The Greys that have worked with our government in their original genetic form, and all the Greys that have left their genetic form in spirit and were born into the human race, are all of the same race. And they are also the same race that lived on the planet Mars over 1 million years ago. This race of Greys are the same ones that are mainly responsible for the destruction of life on Mars and the destruction of the planet's surface and ecology system. They were not alone on Mars. There were also races that share in the responsibility of the destruction on Mars. Okay, so now the lizards are descended from the reptilians. Back in time, the reptilians experimented with genetics, creating a genetically modified version of themselves, causing a great division amongst themselves. The division became a permanent separation of the race, and it split into 2 separate races. Part of this race remained reptilians, while the other part changed their name to the lizards, so as to completely separate themselves from being associated with the reptilians in any way. The lizards are the reptilians that were genetically modified. They were also associated with the dark forces, and in Atlantis, they were called the Sons of Baal, Sons of Darkness, since they followed Baal's leadership, which is another name for Satan. There were also survivors from Atlantis that came into this reality and have crossbred with other survivors and humans. One of the distinguishing features is that the lizards had a red tint to their skin. While they are born into human bodies, when they are born into human bodies, this genetic trait becomes a recessive gene. For those of you who had the thought cross your mind that the red skin is a distinguishing feature of the American Indians, the answer is no. The American Indians are not part of the lizard spiritual beings. They are not connected to the lizards in any way. There is no connection spiritually or physically. The American Indians are a combination of several races from the 4th dimension. They are a distant relative to the Lemurians. They are 1/3 Lemurian. The other 2/3 are a mixture from several of the other minor races that lived in the 4th dimension. The red skin of the American Indians is a result of the combination of genetics from these several smaller races. They did not live in Atlantis, they lived outside of Atlantis, evolving separately as part of the minor races. There were many that survived the pole shift and destruction of Atlantis. So another race that is important to know about are the Zeta Reticuli. This race was not in Atlantis, and they are not part of the past of Earth. They were called in by our Pleiadian guardians over 50 years ago to help control the Greys and protect humans. They're still here today. Their technology is beyond that of the Greys. The Zeta Reticuli were also Greys, and they came from the same planet as the Greys. So there was a great war that destroyed the Greys' home planet. This war was a fight between the forces of darkness and the forces of light. After the destruction of the planet, those of the light made a genetic change to themselves. They genetically eliminated emotion out of their emotional bodies so that they would not again make the same mistake of waging war based on emotions. They took on the name of Zeta Reticuli in order to completely separate themselves from being identified in any way with the Greys. They are here now doing genetic work in order to breed back emotion into their emotional bodies. They have discovered over time that taking out emotion had actually more drawbacks than advantages. The way they are doing this work is that they make contracts at the soul level with spiritual beings before they are born into human bodies. These spiritual beings have a desire to work with the Zeta Reticuli and have full knowledge of what they are doing, which just goes to show that the abductions, if they're done by the Zeta Reticuli, are all contracted before incarnating. When these spiritual beings are born into human bodies, they do not remember their soul contracts, since our memory of the past is blocked when we are in human form. This creates its own set of problems with emotional humans. When these humans reach maturity, genes are then shared with the Zeta Reticuli in various ways. They are working within universal laws and have a very deep respect for all of life. No one has ever been physically hurt by Zeta Reticuli. Their technology is very advanced, even more than the Nephilim gods. We mentioned the Zeta Reticuli since they are often confused with the Greys and are blamed for the abductions and animal mutilations that are done by the Greys. When you see a Zeta Reticuli being and a Grey being standing side by side, they look the exact same. The only way that you can tell who is who is by looking deep into their eyes. The Greys' eyes are coal black and reflective. There's no depth in there, and the reason for this is that they're losing their soul. They are dying as a race, but the Zeta Reticuli eyes have depth. So you can see deep into their soul, and they are advancing as a race. Realize that before the pole shift, Noah's flood and destruction of Atlantis, the only humanoid life forms in the third dimension were the Homo erectus race, the Nephilim, and the human race. All these other races were in the fourth dimension, where life was so abundant. After the pole shift event, they were all joined together as one, forming the new human race. Oh yeah, I am gonna read all that. So after the pole shift was over, several different races, some from inside this universe and some from outside of this universe, visited planet Earth to study how two-stranded DNA would work in a humanoid body. These visiting races had many of their people join the human race, integrating into it through birth as a way to closely study in detail the evolution of two-strand DNA in a humanoid body. There's no better way to study it than to experience it. This was new, and no one knew what the outcome would be. Only time would tell. These races have returned at this time and are prepared to collect their people that are in the human race when the pole shift happens. That is one of the reasons for a portion of the UFO activity that has been going on for the last several decades. At the coming pole shift, the experiment with two-stranded DNA will come to an end, and there is no longer any reason for their people to remain on this planet. Okay, so now I'm going to show this really cool diagram that the author wrote on explaining how dimensions work. So there will be, so like the third dimension, there's 12 octaves between each dimension. And so let's say you start at the third dimensional level, there's 12 octaves in between that, and then there's a void on top of that, a dimensional barrier, and then you'll reach the fourth dimension. Let me just show you so it makes sense. I don't know if it's, I have to check really quick. Oh, okay. I just have to check if it's showing it right or not. So that's that. Okay, so those that dropped from the fourth dimension to the third dimension, including all the human survivors from the third dimension, lost their memory from the past. The Ascended Masters and Homo erectus did not lose their memory. The Nephilim did not lose their memory since they were not on the planet during the pole shift. They were above it in orbit on their craft. They also had the knowledge to preserve the memory if it became necessary. So you may have asked yourself the question, why did the Ascended Masters who came down from the fourth dimension during the pole shift not lose their memory? The Ascended Masters that were in the Sons of Light did not lose their memory since their consciousness was very high. They knew what was happening and they had their merkabas activated. A merkaba is a personal vehicle of light that is composed of two counter-rotating fields of light formed by a very high vibrational consciousness that surrounds the body of a spiritually advanced person. It allows that person to maintain its own magnetic field around its physical body, so it preserves the full memory and consciousness of that spirit while in the human body. Homo erectus did not lose its memory, since they were evolved to the point that they were ascending from the third dimension to the fourth dimension during this pole shift. And I also have a merkaba. Let me show you. I think it's really cool. It has, I think, organites, and it has, what's that other one? Tourmaline, black tourmaline in it, and some other good stuff in it. So when a pole shift happens, the Earth will lose its magnetic field from 1 to 3 days, anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. So do you remember reading about the 3 days of darkness in the Bible? There are many teachings about this event which are false. The 3 days of darkness happen because of the pole shift, and they are the same event. Our memory depends on the magnetic field of the Earth. When we lose the magnetic field, we lose our memory. This is what happened during the pole shift that caused the destruction of Atlantis, and at the same time, Noah's flood in the third dimension. The survivors of the pole shift lost their memory of the past. That's the main reason why the Nephilim wrote the ancient text, including the books that are contained in the Old Testament of the Bible, so that man would know about his past. As these books were written, Creator inspired changes or added what was needed to help man evolve, even when man was led and manipulated by the Nephilim. So this next part is extremely important. According to the book, in 1972, there was 5 Satans that were on the Earth, and they decided to time travel back in time to rewrite history to basically end the human race. When that happened, a group of golden angels noticed what they did, so they too went back in time to change what the Satans had changed. The golden angels literally saved us. And when they changed the timeline back to a good one, the Schumann Resonance, which is the vibration of the planet, for the first time in like thousands of years, changed. It went from its constant 7.8 to 7.9 now. For those who follow psychic predictions about the doomsday of the world, you may have noticed these predictions are no longer accurate. Even the prophecies of Nostradamus aren't accurate anymore. Why? Because we changed timelines. In 1987, the Earth entered the photon belt. In 1996, we had a huge consciousness shift, which changed our reality again. The Earth's future is no longer tied to any predictions. Any Earth changes that happen are now directly tied to the collective world consciousness, not ancient prophecies. The collective world consciousness now has the ability to bring about total peace or total destruction. I don't think I wrote it here, but the photon belt, supposedly it allows more light, meaning more knowledge, to come into humanity, which is why we're having like great awakenings quickly. So when you're at 50 stranded DNA, your merkaba self-activates at this point. When the dimensional shift happens, you can now make the shift from the third to the fourth dimension while retaining your full memory and consciousness. During the shift, the Earth's magnetic field will collapse, causing the loss of memory for anyone who does not have their merkaba activated. Your active merkaba will produce a magnetic field around your body, keeping your memory intact. After this, the direct path to ascension will be smoother as you keep evolving your DNA and entering light body. If you're in light body, when the shift comes, you may just ascend to the highest dimensions and go back home to source. You'll literally be skipping fourth and fifth dimension and probably all the other ones. I'll probably link down below the merkaba meditation that I like in the description. Okay, so planet Earth, the place to be. Did you know that overpopulation is not an acceptable way of life on other planets? Do you realize why the world is so overpopulated? The reason is that many spirits want to experience our home, since the experiences on this planet are so unique and are not available on any other planet. This planet at this time is the place to be. This is where all the excitement is at in this Milky Way galaxy. Our home planet Earth is the center of attention in this universe and countless surrounding universes. Do you remember why? This is the last planet in the Milky Way galaxy where teaching to ascend is still being taught. It's also the vibration of this planet that will be measured at the pole shift and then superimposed on a newly created universe that is ready for us to experience. Everyone's vibration will contribute toward this measurement, for good or bad. It is also the last battleground and the ending of the Lucifer rebellion that started 18 million years ago. This is the first time that there are 7 Satans and 7 Melchizedeks at the same planet, on the same planet at the same time. Another first is that this is the first direct ascension from a 3rd dimensional planet to the higher spiritual dimensional levels in this universe. Also, this is the only 3rd dimensional planet you can ascend from to the higher dimensional levels. This has been made possible by the starseeds, the wanderers, the ascended masters, the angelic beings, the astral purebred, and those of the order of Melchizedek, who came to this planet to awaken the spirits that fell during the time of Atlantis. These are the reasons why there are close to 1 trillion spirits, 1 trillion, still waiting for any chance to be born anywhere on this planet at this time. Do you realize how fortunate you are to be here? Do you have any real understanding of the privilege you have to be here now, living on this planet, living at this time on planet Earth? So we have stated that overpopulation is not an acceptable way of life. At this moment in time, we can give you information from the Akashic records that will enlighten you to the purpose of the 6 billion people who are now on the planet. Probably more like 7 to 8 now, because this was 2006. So this is just using data from when they did it, 2003. Okay, so they're going to break down the numbers into percentages. So 22% of people here are from the many races in the 4th dimension, the civilization of Atlantis, and the original human race. They are now all integrated together as one in the modern human race. 38% are spirits that dimensionally fell as a result of the Lucifer rebellion and lost their connection to universal consciousness, just like the spiritual beings that fell in Atlantis. 18% are here for the purpose of gathering genetic material for their own races to help them advance and evolve. Others are gathering genetic material to save their dying races. 15% are here to experience the dimensional shift from a great variety of races, and many of them are from outside of this universe. 4% are here to hold the light and help raise the vibration of the planet for the coming ascension. Those spirits come from many evolved 4th, 5th, and 6th dimensional races from inside and outside of the universe. 3% are from a variety of groups called the astral purebred, starseeds, wanderers, ascended masters, and those from the order of Melchizedek. These are the driving forces trying to awaken humans to the fact that they are spirit and to prepare this planet for the ascension. There are also a few from the Father and Son universes who are descendants from the ancient ones. They are hidden among you and are not known. They are merely observers coming here to help their fallen spiritual family to return to their spiritual homes. Humans have no idea of the great sacrifices that were made for them out of pure love. This information will help you to gain a greater understanding of what the human race is composed of and the main reasons why 6 billion spirits are now living in the human race. Realize that it is a very great privilege to be on this planet at this time. We cannot express to you how privileged you are to be chosen to be here at this time. There is close to 1 trillion spirits still waiting in line in hopes of being able to be born into the human race. Those who are here now on the planet have the greatest capability to ascend to their dimensional homes if they will apply themselves to becoming masters of their emotions. The greatest majority of the almost trillion spirits waiting for a chance to be born into the human race are all casualties from the Lucifer rebellion, who are still trying to work their way back to their dimensional home. This is the last planet in this galaxy where the teaching on how to ascend back to your dimensional home is still going on, and it's the last and only third dimensional planet where you can ascend from. This is the reason why the tremendous overpopulation is allowed to happen on the planet at this time. So that's all I have for the video. Take it or leave it. There's still a lot of stuff I don't agree with in the book, but that's completely fine. It's more towards the stuff that I'm reading now. Probably won't mention a lot of it, but there's either going to be a part 2 or part 3 to this video, depending on how much content I choose to squeeze from the second half of the book into here. This is just the first half of the book. There's so much information that I didn't even cover because there's just too much to cover in video format. But once again, this is the book, DNA in the Sands of Time by J. Justice.